I can see the chat. Good stuff. I think we are live. I'm not sure, but we should be.
Oh, I'm getting an ad, so there's that.
Oh, there's an ad. I actually disabled ads for this live stream. Looks like I did something wrong. Welcome everyone, in case you are viewing already and seeing us talking here. Oh yes, so people can hear us.
That's good.
Awesome. See how I can...
Yeah, I think we're good.
One sec, editor. Here we go. He looks pretty live. Okay, yeah, welcome everyone. Hi Ben, how are you doing?
Hey Miguel, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on stream today.
Yeah, it's been a while since I actually decided to actually organize something with you. I think I first watched your channel during COVID, I think. I discovered you during COVID.
Yeah.
I was very bored and I saw this 5 a.m. video. I saw the thumbnail, it said 5 a.m.
Yep. That video was very outside of what I normally create, I guess. But I guess the combination of posting it close to the new year and I guess apparently a thumbnail that seemed to work. It's like my second most popular video, which is funny because it has nothing to do with game development or anything else on my channel. That's just how it goes, I guess.
Yeah, and yeah, also congrats to 150k now, I think. You reached 150k?
Thank you. Yeah, that was a couple weeks ago. That was a pretty cool milestone. Yeah, I think the stretch from like 120,000 to 150,000 was a very long stretch in comparison. I think when I started my Dauphin devlogs, I picked up a lot of steam at that point and gained quite a bit of followers and like zoomed right past 100k and then it slowed down. It's funny how all that works. Kind of have no idea what drives all that, but thank you. It was cool to hit that milestone. I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a huge number. It's almost like unimaginable to see like 150,000 people in one place. You know, it's a number that doesn't really fit into our brains, I think.
Yeah, it doesn't really mean much when you think about it. It's like how many people would really be sitting there watching you or following you. It's hard to imagine it, but yeah, it's very cool. Definitely it's a privilege to have so many people interested in what I'm doing. So thank you all for following.
Yeah, I'm one of them, by the way. Talking about your YouTube channel, yeah, I think your first devlog 0 of Blink released 4 years ago. And the first thing that I noticed when I watched it a while ago is it has already this like DevDuck feel to it. Although you probably at that point didn't really know what DevDuck will be, right?
Certainly not. The beginning of the channel was interesting. So the DevDuck feel, which I guess is kind of chill. I guess chill is the only word to describe it, although it sounds kind of silly. That really came from Thin Matrix. So shout out to Thin Matrix. I discovered his channel, I think while I was at work one day. I was like on my lunch break and I was just browsing around YouTube and I found some of his devlogs for Equilinox, which was his 3D kind of environment shaping game that he wrote in Java. And I just totally fell in love with his videos, kind of talking about his day as an indie game developer, and that was kind of like his full-time thing. So kind of show you how he woke up, had a healthy lifestyle, worked on his game and stuff. And I distinctly remember thinking when I discovered his channel that day, like I would love if like this was my life, if this is what my day-to-day was, like this is so cool. And being able to make videos like that. So eventually, this was quite a while later when I decided to actually try to make my first video. I had been working on games in my free time, but never took off on any one because there was no accountability. And I decided, why don't I actually make the YouTube video, make a devlog series, kind of to try to do the Thin Matrix thing and see if that worked out, but also just to have some accountability. Like if even one person apart from my significant other was interested in what I was building, maybe it would keep me on track instead of having me like abandon the project in just a few weeks. So yeah, that was the genesis of it all, and certainly it took a handful of devlogs before anyone started watching it all, but something seems to have worked since then, I guess.
Yeah, especially Blink. It was kind of genius, I find, to have a game that is so simple in essence with the one finger mechanic. But it's actually quite difficult, right, to build a game that is so restricted by just one finger, right?
Yeah. My goal with Blink was really to release a game and to finish one, which is part of the whole accountability thing for creating the devlog. And so as a part of that, I really wanted to try to keep things as simple as possible in terms of like scope or features, which is obviously not the case anymore with Dauphin. But so I did want to challenge myself to have something that was like in the hyper casual genre. So I'm thinking you pull out your phone while you're waiting for the bus or something, and you play it with one finger, just for a few minutes, to waste a few minutes, right? So that was my goal, and it certainly was a challenge to make something compelling. I wouldn't necessarily say I succeeded. I think the game was pretty well received on the app stores. I assume probably mostly because people enjoyed my devlogs and wanted to support, which is awesome. But I did get some very valid critical feedback about Blink that it just didn't quite have the gameplay hook that it needed, which is totally fair. It's something that it was my first real game, and it was difficult to manage building it, making the videos, actually finishing it, and having it be something super compelling. But all that said, I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think it was a great first project.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a watch. So people go back to Ben's channel and watch the old videos. I say old, no, it's 4 years, but it's actually quite a young channel, 4 years old. But it's definitely worth a watch. And you also actually released the game, and from start to finish, it's great to see. Quick question, I forgot to ask it earlier. We chatted about your 5 a.m. Motivation video. I noticed there is a guitar in the background. Do you play guitar?
I dabble. I don't play very often at all, but I do like to. The extent of my guitar playing comes down to knowing most of the major chords, and if I find myself really enjoying a particular song, looking it up on the internet how to play it with 4 or 5 chords and having a go at it. That's about the most I know. I do play the piano a bit more. You may have seen. Actually, I have a video where I played a song from Stardew Valley.
Yes.
Probably about a year ago on the channel. Growing up, I took about 7 years of piano lessons when I was a kid.
Oh, wow.
Nothing recent. So I have not progressed much further past my childhood experience, but I still really do love to play, and I've got a little electric keyboard. So it's actually my plan for sound for Dauphin. I've already written or composed 2 songs for Dauphin. They're just very simple because I still don't even hardly know how to use the software to make a good song. But I do like to try to play music. I guess that's the broad answer.
Funny you say that. I saw this stream. I don't remember which channel that was, but there is a video stream on YouTube where Concerned Ape was interviewed about the music of Stardew Valley. And he actually said something similar, where as a kid he took like a couple of years piano lessons, and in essence he said he has no idea what he's doing. He just dabbles. But when you listen to the soundtrack, it's such a good soundtrack. And I think that
isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
The music in Stardew Valley is somehow like as masterfully crafted as the gameplay. I truly can't imagine how a single person got so many things right in a game like that. But I also listened to a podcast at one point where he was interviewed about his music, and he said something I found very interesting. He talked about how coding was actually sometimes something he really didn't enjoy doing while working on Stardew Valley. It's definitely my favorite thing to do. But when he needed a break from coding, he needed a break from coding, he would make music. And that was like his fun part of working on Stardew Valley. And he said he actually made a lot more music than he ever shipped with the game because he needed so many of those breaks, and he ended up creating so many tracks, which I think is cool.
Yeah, my problem is I also compose music, but I only do it when I'm sad or depressed. So I use it more as an emotional, a mental health thing rather than as a positive, creative thing. So yeah, but the music of Stardew Valley is absolutely recognizable. And I'm actually quite excited to see what you will come up with for Dauphin in terms of music. I really like the tracks you compose for Dauphin. Yeah, we will chat about Dauphin in a bit. Another project you did was this Arctic game that you canceled. So why are you not still developing it? What went wrong?
Yeah, so I think you're talking about Polar.
Yes.
Or what I named at the time was Polar, and that was a game where you were, I guess, kind of like a low poly polar bear, and it was. I'm trying to remember what really my view for it was. It was kind of like it was in 3D, but it was a side scroller, and I did that to give myself a chance to learn about some 3D game programming patterns while still kind of limiting the game mechanics to 2 dimensions, which I thought was a smart way to try to break into the 3D space. So I started that game in Unity, and we're off to a pretty good start, I would say. I had fun making the few devlogs that I did for it. I ultimately realized that the vision I had for the game was going to mean that it was going to be under development for a really long time. The problem with that was that I did not have the passion that I had for that project to extend its development out that long. I think it would have been great as a project that lasted a few months, but I couldn't really think of a way to make it compelling with just a few months worth of development time, if that makes sense. I couldn't really figure out how to condense it down to something that size. So I ultimately decided to scrap it and start working on Dauphin, which has been something I wanted to start building since I got into hobbyist game development, but I wanted to build up some skills before attempting it because I didn't want to jump off into the deep end and give up because I was frustrated by it. So yeah, it was kind of a bummer to give it up, but I do definitely think it was the right choice to make time for what I'm working on now.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about Polar was the atmosphere. I'm a huge fan of Scandinavia and the North, and I'm also actually more a winter person than a summer person.
Yep.
Although I'm 50% Spanish from my father's side, and the other side is German. I love the winter, and this winter aesthetic was very peaceful and calm. But it's great to see that with your big project Dauphin, that you actually capture a similar like calm vibe with it. For people who don't know, like actually Dauphin, the first devlog 0, it was built in Unity, right? It actually wasn't Godot Engine.
It was. That's right. Boy, that was a challenging time for me. I'm the type of person who gets, what do they call it, like analysis paralysis, right? You're trying to make a decision on something and you just can't. I did hours and hours of research into which game development engine I should, kick off my big project with. Obviously, Unity made sense because at this point I had shipped 2 mobile games with it, and I was, I had some experience with it. On the other hand, there were things about Unity that I really disliked at the time, and Godot was kind of starting to get more popular, and I had tried it and built some little prototypes with it, and I liked the community and the open source aspect. So I kind of built a small prototype of Dauphin with basic WASD movement and stuff like that with Unity. And then I did it with Godot, following actually Heartbeast's tutorial, his 2D action RPG tutorial, which is fantastic. I was able to iterate so quickly with Godot, and it was so much more lightweight. I mean, I'm pretty sure I have a video, or maybe I did a video in collaboration with GD Quest on this, but it was a much better fit for me for a number of reasons, especially because I wanted to stick with kind of 2D pixel art at the time. yeah, we made the shift, and I think the video where I talk about converting the project is another one of my most popular ones at this point.
Oh yes. Real quick for people who may not know, can you quickly give like a rundown of the idea behind Dauphin? What is that game about? What is Dauphin?
Yeah, so Dauphin, I guess for those of you who don't know, I grew up on a lake as a child in Virginia here in the United States. My whole childhood, I grew up swimming in the lake, canoeing, catching frogs, catching fish, and actually my family still lives on that lake, so I go back and visit. But that made me really interested as a young child in like nature and just aquatic life because I spent so much time out there. So when I went to college, I actually thought I was going to become a marine biologist. I had my heart set on that. I took chemistry, biology, cell bio. I was on track for organic chemistry and all that stuff. And so I was really, and still am passionate about that topic. But my dad is a software engineer, and he knew I liked computers, so he was like, "Oh, go try Intro to Computer Science. You'll be good at it." And of course, I fell in love with it, love writing code. So I did change course at that point and become a software developer. But the underlying passion that I still have for kind of marine biology is what has driven the theme of Dauphin. My best friend, his name is Sai, and I think I mentioned this in one of Dauphin's earlier devlogs. He lived next door to me at the lake when I was growing up. He was also my roommate at college, and he went on to become a marine biologist. And so the main character of Dauphin is kind of like loosely based around him and what he's doing today, which is actually spending time out in the ocean and doing research about, ocean life, which is just super cool. So the whole idea behind Dauphin is an RPG where you play as a marine biologist, and as you are out kind of exploring the oceans, both below the water and above the water on islands, you encounter this mysterious corruption that's kind of having a negative effect on all life, right? So all organisms, whether they be trees, plants, crabs above water, or vegetation, or fish underwater, everything can be affected by this. And so one of the main mechanics in Dauphin is going to be figuring out how to get rid of that corruption and restore health to the environment. I feel like that was a ramble, but I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yes, let me see if this works. I'm gonna pull up some footage of Dauphin so people can see actually what the game will look like. And you can maybe explain a bit what we are seeing here. So the first thing we're gonna show is actually the island combat here. So you don't see it right now, I think, but people on stream will see it. So what is the idea behind this cleansing mechanic?
So this, I like RPGs that have combat. And I think many people do because most RPGs have some form of combat, right? My interest in video games is rooted in games like RuneScape and Diablo, where you engage in some form of combat and you are rewarded by getting some type of drop or some type of reward for engaging in that combat. I didn't think it was really appropriate to have what I would call like violent combat. Maybe that really wasn't what I wanted to do because so many RPGs do that. So I thought it made for a unique spin on things to have the combat be a force for good in Dauphin, where we're removing this corruption. And obviously, some of the most popular comments I get is like, you say you're removing corruption, but it looks like you're just whacking a crab with a stick, which is more or less what you're doing in the game. But this is my way to try to put a positive spin on it. And I think it'll give me the flexibility that I need to kind of create some cool and compelling combat mechanisms through these, since you're not just doing physical damage to something, you're removing corruption. So I can get pretty clever, I think, with items that have these magical effects or whatever they ultimately need to be to remove this corruption.
What kind of blew my mind is when you started showing off the diving mechanic, because so far, right, like the game was like on land, you would like explore caves, and you showed like the procedural generation of caves, yada yada. And I think even the ocean exploration with the boat. But at some point, you actually introduced the diving mechanic. I'm quickly gonna pull this up as well so people can see how this actually works. But the cutest thing is that it like zooms out and then the player disappears with a little bloop. And then you are entering a new world, you know, it's so cool.
Yeah, I was, I mean, to be honest, the diving mechanic, I think is my biggest triumph so far with Dauphin. I always had this idea that you'd be able to just dive anywhere where the water is deep enough. And with either procedural generation or if you dive in the right spot, something handcrafted, you enter this underwater world where the perspective kind of shifts, which is kind of interesting because now it becomes kind of a side-scrolling thing, but I really kind of kept a lot of the same player animations because I didn't want to like totally change the perspective of the player, but strangely it seems to kind of work. I'm watching it now on a few seconds delayed on my iPad here. But I was so thrilled with how it came out. I mean, I have a ton of work to do. Obviously, the water doesn't really animate, and it doesn't particularly look underwater, I think, in some cases. But for the first pass at it, I thought this was super cool. It really feels like you are in a completely different environment than it does when you're above the water. But you can still do things like use your weapon and explore and swim around and interact with organisms that are, you know, are affected by this corruption. So yeah, still a lot of work to do as I watch the video clip I sent you, but I've been really thrilled with how this turned out for like a first pass on this mechanic.
Yeah, especially I like the consistency in gameplay, that you actually do similar gameplay on the ocean floor to the land, right? You still cleanse. So what is actually the motivation for the player to dive down when they already can do this stuff on land?
Well, I think it's a good question. One that probably I still need to actually work on answering a bit better. But I just want the player to felt like they're rewarded for exploring by encountering new organisms and kind of I don't know, encountering new types of treasure rewards for exploring. So I want there to be the concept of, you know, you're exploring islands. I want to have a climbing feature in the future where you can kind of have a verticality aspect while you're above water. So you can maybe get into a colder biome up on a mountain on an island and encounter more Arctic organisms up there. Obviously the tropical biome of like the sea level islands, and then the whole concept of being underwater where all of a sudden it's a whole different group of aquatic creatures. And right now my procedural generation only really works for fairly shallow underwater areas, but I ultimately want the player to be able to upgrade their diving skill and dive very deep down to, you know, where there's hardly any light. The player will have to have a light source. You'll encounter anglerfish and these other kind of deep sea dwelling creatures. So I just want, the more the player plays, the further they'll be able to explore, encounter more kind of exotic and interesting organisms to save from corruption. And then, you know, as the sand crab drops the sand crab shell fragment, you know, you'll be able to gather resources from these creatures that are deeper down or harder to reach, and you'll be able to kind of continue to build your character out. That's kind of what I see as the gameplay loop right now, and at least what I'm working towards with a lot of my like core system development.
Nice. Yeah, what you are telling there reminds me a bit of Subnautica, but probably less horror and more on the concept of exploration, like Stardew Valley. You know, it's like not meant to be a horror game, right?
Right. Yeah. Not a lot of horror. I still want there to be. I mean, I think with the underwater stuff that I've created so far, there is still a little bit of a sense of stress that you create. Of course, I guess any time you're on a timer, right? Whether it be because you're holding your breath or you have to wrap up before the end of the day or whatever. It definitely adds a little bit more of a stress element than when you're just walking around on the island. But yeah, so I think that'll be a fun element. But yeah, horror is something I'm not entirely leaning into. But you know, we never know. Maybe it's going to be pretty scary down there where there's no light on the seafloor. So we'll see.
Yeah, let's talk about my favorite feature in Dauphin, which is my favorite feature in every game that has this mechanic. And And I think Ben can already guess what I'm talking about. I'm talking about fishing. So, yeah, can you tell me a bit about fishing, considering that fishing usually is not about saving fish, right?
Yes. Fishing in Dauphin, where to begin with this? So, fishing is also one of my favorite kind of mini games in any RPG. This started with the Ocarina of Time, which I guess, I don't know if you'd call it an RPG. Maybe you would. But I remember as a kid, even after I had beaten Ocarina of Time many times, I would still boot up the game and go to that little fishing area on Lake Kailea and just play the fishing minigame because I thought it was so fun. And of course, that's extended all throughout all the other games I've played into adulthood now. So I knew I wanted to have a fishing mechanic in Dauphin. And to be totally honest, I'm not quite sure how it works with the corruption system yet. I think there's a possibility for catching, a corrupted fish and maybe releasing it would remove the corruption in some way. I haven't really thought about that yet. But really I'm seeing it more as kind of another way to gather resources. And obviously, keeping a fish that you catch maybe doesn't fit in with the theme of, saving nature. And people definitely commented that when I built the feature out in that devlog. I actually had a pretty, I thought, productive discourse with Emilio on Twitter. He kind of brought this up, and I thought it was, it's a great point, thinking about how in Dauphin you're talking about saving wildlife, and in this case you catch a fish and have the chance to keep it. I tend to think that my view on this is that there's a balance that can be achieved, right? I think hunters and fishers who fish for themselves, not like not these huge commercial enterprises. I think individuals who do that for food or for sustenance or for their own families probably have a greater appreciation for these animals than people who don't. So I think there's a balance for something like that. That's probably a heavy topic for this this live stream, but that's what I'm leaning into with fishing. I don't think it's inappropriate to have in there, I guess is what I'm saying. But people will disagree with that, and I think that's totally okay. It's an important topic to discuss.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? How to balance fun game mechanics compared to your game's story and world building, right? How they can sometimes contradict. And maybe sometimes it's fine to contradict. If it's fun, who cares? But then maybe we want people to care, right?
Yep. Yeah. It's all about the balance. I wouldn't want the player to be causing mass disruption or, to the environment in some way. But I certainly think an appropriate level of give and take is realistic, because I think that's just kind of how the real environment works.
Especially if you give a player the tools, they will do it. A good example is was it Ultima Online, where they actually simulated the population of animals very accurately, and actually player abused the system in a way that like 90% of the wildlife would just be completely gone. It was like some big thing they had to disable. Yes, I think there is a no-clip documentary on it, or there's some video documentary on YouTube about the animal system in Ultima Online, I think. So yeah, players will find a way. I've never heard of that.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I may drop you a link later on this.
Yeah, I'd be interested to check that out.
Talking about dropping a link, for people who are unaware, there is a little symbol here, and this is the symbol of GoGodotJam, because this is a GoGodotJam event. It's organized by Adrian, and if you want to join a game jam, or you want to celebrate Godot Engine, once or twice a year we have this game jam festival, how we call it, which consists of a game jam and events like these, streams like these. And yeah, visit GoGodotJam.com. It's not easy to pronounce, though. I also got a little t-shirt. Let me show it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes. I bought it just for today. Yeah, check out the link. I think it's a great project to raise awareness for Godot Engine itself, because Godot is still quite niche. But I think the eyes are are all everyone is watching now, especially with Godot 4 now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so another thing you have, which I personally find very interesting, you have actually an NPC in your game, right?
I do have a single NPC.
Yeah, who is that guy? What does he do?
So that guy, he doesn't do much right now. He was still functions as a proof of concept for the NPC system. He is just right now he's set up to become like a fishing vendor. That whole little building that he lives in is kind of going to be a place where the user could trade for fishing supplies, maybe also trade fish, as you can kind of do in Stardew Valley, I guess, if you were to need some type of currency for anything. But yeah, this was just to kind of prove out the concept of having another character in the game who the player could interact with. I think this fella came to life as I was building out the interaction system and starting to work on the dialogue manager code. So yeah, it's kind of funny. I was pretty pleased with how he turns out. He kind of stands there and blinks. When you walk in, he waves at you. So it was fun to kind of customize some of that and make it feel a little bit, I don't know if immersive is the right word, but add a little bit of, I don't know, just make him feel more like a real character. Yeah.
Are you using any add-ons, by the way? Any Godot add-ons?
I'm not using any add-ons at all right now.
Oh wow!
For better or worse, I have coded everything that you see myself. That is to say that I think I will end up integrating an add-on for the dialogue system. The way that my dialogue system currently works, there's nothing wrong with it, I would say, but it relies on JSON. And all the dialogue that it supports right now is very simple. So I think if I really wanted to have some branching dialogue, I would have to really put in some effort to build out that system. And I don't think you can. I have not figured out a way to open a JSON file within the Godot editor, which drives me nuts. I have to open VS Code to mess around with the JSON file, which I hate. But maybe I'm missing something. Maybe someone in chat can tell me I'm wrong. But I've seen a number of dialogue managers out there that have really nice in-editor support for building branching dialogue. I know Emilio Coppola is working on one, Dialogic. I think Nathan Hode, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, also has a dialogue manager. So I've been looking into both of those, and I think one of those two will probably make its way into Dauphin at some point.
Yeah, in my game, I also I tried both. So I have implemented Dialogic and also a Godot dialogue manager side by side, actually. And that's the cool thing also about Godot Engine. You can just have multiple add-ons and just swap them out and activate one or the other. And depending on which one is activated, a different system is online. It's pretty cool. The Godot dialogue manager by Nathan, it's a bit more simple in terms of setup because you have text files, while I would say that Dialogic is more sophisticated. But also more complicated to learn. So, but both amazing projects. And it's all open source, so you can just go on GitHub and check them out. So another thing that you I think recently introduced, right, is crafting.
Yeah, so crafting is something that I've only kind of teased in my Discord at this point, but I hope to have a video coming out within the next 2 or 3 days on the topic. Crafting is going to be a huge feature in Dauphin, and I kind of talked about this in the beginning of the devlog. I think a lot of RPGs have crafting, probably almost every RPG. I think sometimes crafting can be a really compelling feature, and other times I feel like it's just kind of bolted on and might not be, just kind of get in the way more than anything else. So I did spend some time thinking about for Dauphin, did I want to implement crafting because I thought it needed it because it's an RPG, or did I have a compelling reason to actually build it? I think I have a compelling reason to build it. At least I hope I do. I'll be curious to hear folks' feedback from the video. But apart from collecting materials and crafting equipment that you can use on the player character, a big purpose for crafting will be to set up camp sites on islands that you discover. So you can think of maybe the best comparison I could come up with is like Animal Crossing, where you would have a little campsite that you kind of have your main maybe tent that you can go into and rest, but then you might have some decorations around camp. maybe another good example is Valheim, where you kind of build a bit of a structure that provides shelter, and then you can decorate it or, put some storage boxes around there and kind of use that as a base. So I'm kind of leaning into Valheim a little bit on this because I absolutely love that game and the way that crafting works in that game. But my goal is to have it so that when the player creates a campsite on an island, it creates a fast travel point back to that island. So the idea is that the player can sail to different islands, and as they discover one, if they know they want to come back to it, they can gather some resources and set up a basic campsite. From that point, they could gather more resources and start to build it out, decorate it more, maybe kind of have like a comfort or a rested bonus as you get in Valheim based on how much you've decorated it, and then have room to like store materials and stuff if you were to create storage chests and stuff like that. So I'm very early in the process of building all this out. I really just have the crafting panel where you can combine ingredients and get something back in your inventory. But I'm really excited to build out the rest of this.
Did you let me just put the music back on. I noticed that it auto disabled. Did you ever play Pokemon Ruby or Sapphire?
Sadly, no. I think I played the heck out of Red, Blue, and Yellow, and I think that was it.
Because I think it was Ruby and Sapphire, right? You have this mechanic where you can find a shelter or like a cave, and you can claim it, and then you can place furniture in there and have your little base, and then you can actually visit other people's bases when you link up with them. It's pretty cool. And then you can also win custom furniture, and this is a Game Boy game. It's actually bizarre that so long ago they already built mechanics like this, and it was so much fun. I remember as a kid to play this. Yeah.
That's cool.
All right. So I got a couple of Dauphin questions, and by the way, anyone in chat, if you have any questions for Ben or maybe myself, but Ben is the guest here, so yeah, if you have any questions for Ben, drop them in the chat, and I will ask them. Yes, it's from Pokemon Ruby. Ludo S said, yes. I got a couple of like questions on Dauphin that are more specific. So, is there any feature in Dauphin that you would love to build or love to implement, but you know it's too hard to implement, or it would be too much effort?
That's a funny question because I have almost no blinders on when it comes to increasing Dauphin's scope, which is just horrible.
Same with my game.
Yeah. I think, and I'm going to hate myself for saying this, but I think some parts of Dauphin would lend themselves quite well to like local multiplayer. But I don't, at least for any version 1.0 that I release, there's no way I would ever try to tackle that. But exploring together, I don't know, it's with the crafting and everything, it almost feels like it could be co-op like Valheim is. You explore, you work to clear out an island of corruption. If you're up against a big group of corrupted, like higher level creatures, bringing a friend along to tackle that. And then maybe being able to visit each other's campsites that you set up, right? Something like that. So, but there's no way I would ever increase scope to that, at least until everything else was done, I think.
Did you ever take a look at the new network nodes of Godot 4?
I have not.
Because you can drag in like 2 nodes and you have multiplayer. Like it's quite simple. It's quite powerful what they built in Godot 4.
No, don't talk me into implementing multiplayer in the next couple weeks.
No, I won't. But just for people to be aware, Godot Engine 4 has some very amazing new nodes that do a lot of the heavy lifting out of the box. And I haven't looked at it myself, and I'm afraid to do so because I share your concern that I might get ideas.
Yeah, I will say that scope creep is something that I have generally allowed with Dauphin, and I've thought about that a couple times. And what I've realized is that obviously Dauphin is something I want to release. I don't really have a deadline for myself, which is good and bad. But the reason why I'm still working on Dauphin after however many years it's been, 2 or 3 years working on this project, it's because I let myself build whatever I want. and tackle challenges that I think will be interesting, like a Valheim style crafting system, which is obviously very complex. So I think it's actually been a boon to my game development, not career, hobby. I guess hobby is what I'd call it. To let myself build what I'm most interested in, and just let myself go with whatever ideas come around. You know, if I was doing this full time and trying to ship a game, I would have to do it differently. But that's kind of what's nice about being a hobbyist, is that I can kind of set my own timeline and not restrict what I want to create. So I've found that works pretty well for me. I'm not recommending to all the viewers that they let scope creep just fly off the rails, but I found it to be fun.
Yeah. Danny Liebin is asking if you got inspired by No Man's Sky in terms of crafting and base building.
No Man's Sky, yeah. So I actually did my first kind of run through of that game. Probably put only about 20 hours into it. Probably about 6 months to a year ago, and I was really pleasantly like hooked into it for the couple months that I played. I guess I probably did more than 20 hours, but that is a very cool game as well. And the base building was another thing that I really liked. It kind of felt at times like I really liked the base building, and I really liked kind of the processing of materials and trying to create new materials. It kind of almost felt like a very simple version of like Satisfactory or something, the way you could kind of set up I don't know, material chains to create stuff that you needed. And also the ship customization and flying was like super cool, being able to go to a like one of those floating starship stations or whatever and find a cool ship that I had enough credits to buy from someone. That was like super cool. I don't know, I love that. I've been meaning to dive back into it, but I haven't had the time.
Yeah. They even have some like Dead Space style missions, right, where you can go on an abandoned space station in the system and explore it, and they're like aliens and they're like very evil, and it's actually quite scary.
I don't think I've honestly scraped much of the surface of all of the content that the devs have added to that game since its launch. I think it was like the Outlaw update when I played briefly.
Oh, that's ages ago.
So I did like
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a while ago, and I did like one of the outlaw missions, and I got like the cool little outlaw hood that you get or whatever. But I definitely did not get deep into any of those interesting systems that they had added. So that's why I want to revisit it someday.
Yeah. The next question is a bit what's the word? Controversial, maybe? I don't know. So is there a feature or element in Dauphin that you added that you are now regret building? So is there anything
feature that I have
that you regret that you built it?
Oh, that I regret building?
Yes.
Oh, that's a good question.
And let me maybe add a bit more context where I'm coming from here with this. Often, once you put something out there, it's out there and known, and you can't take it back. You know.
Yeah.
And yeah.
That's a great question. I don't know if there's anything that I've put out there that I've like shared with, my YouTube community that I wish I hadn't, or that I wish I could remove from the game. I don't think that's the case. I certainly don't have any plans to like cut major functionality that I've built in. Maybe the closest answer I have is, and this doesn't really answer the question, but I'm deeply unsatisfied with my sailing system right now. I worked forever on the like directional, however many, it's like 8 directional sprites that I made for that sailboat, and they just don't look good after I don't know how many hours I spent trying to clean those up, because I am not a gifted pixel artist as Miguel is here, but
stop it.
No, I worked on that forever, and then I was like, all right, it's finally at a place where it's good enough where I can bring the art in and actually develop the sailing mechanic. And I just couldn't get it to feel good. I couldn't get it to feel not like a chore to get in that boat and sail somewhere else. I'm looking at like Wind Waker, which I love, and obviously sailing is just fantastic in that game. And I'm not going to achieve anything like that from a top-down pixel art experience, but I basically plan to nearly scrap what I've done so far and try to rebuild it in a way that's more compelling. Because I want players to be excited to jump on that boat and either sail out to maybe a dive spot in the open ocean that an NPC has told them about, so they can dive down and find like a handcrafted rather than procedurally generated underwater scene, or sail to like just sail in the open ocean and find an island, right, where they want to jump off the boat, create a campsite, and explore some more. So I think it's a necessary game mechanic. I just have to make it fun. The big challenge.
One idea I had, and that came to mind when I read the terrible news that another big chunk of Antarctica is breaking off. You could like strike a parallel to like climate change by introducing like ice floatable ice platforms, you know?
Yeah. I've actually thought about that. I've talked about the player having to have a higher maybe climbing skill to go higher on mountains, or a better diving skill to go deeper. The player could potentially have to upgrade their boat more to be able to break through sea ice to get out to, I don't know, a more Arctic part of the ocean. I'm going to be very liberal with the biomes in Dauphin because I just think that's fun. I want you to be able to kind of find different biomes in the game, not just pure tropical. But I do like that idea. I think that would be a lot of fun to build.
Yeah, it's I'm quite excited for Dauphin to come out. Is there like a rough estimate for a playable demo at least, like a vertical slice of some sort?
I'm glad you asked me that and not when the game was going to come out, because I've definitely done way more thinking about the vertical slice. I don't know if I'm going to hit this target, but at the beginning of this year, I told myself that at the end of this year, I'd like to have a vertical slice with the main player skill mechanics like fishing, crafting, climbing, diving. And yeah, I mean, I kind of have to define what the vertical slice will be. I'd like to maybe have 2 islands that the player can sail between, have a couple NPCs that you can talk to, be able to explore a few different underwater areas, some that are procedural and some that are handcrafted. I mean, I'm just describing what the vertical slice is, right? Like one of everything that I'm building in. So I think my scope target continues to kind of shift a little bit, but I would love to have something close to being distributable and playable just to get a feel for the basic game mechanics at the end of the year. But we will see.
Yeah. So talking about building an RPG, I want to talk a little bit about the general challenges of building an RPG, because I think we both built smaller games and like games maybe with one mechanic, games with a few mechanics, but as we both know, when you build an RPG, there are a lot of challenges suddenly that are, I think, just come with the nature of how RPGs need to feel, right? It's all about immersion. It's all about that you are that character in the wild, doing the things. So what would be like your list of like top challenges or things to look out for anyone out there who may want to consider building their dream RPG?
That's a really good question. I think I'm probably not the most equipped to answer that, since I have not released a successful RPG, so I can't necessarily say that what I'm doing is correct. I think one of the biggest challenges that I have found in trying to design Dauphin is figuring out how to make it a game that people want to play for a long time. I think RPGs are best when you feel like you can invest continued time into the development of your character and be continually rewarded for it. I think some games do that well. Some games don't. I mean, I've talked about it a number of times on the channel, but old school RuneScape is a game that I played as a kid back when it was just RuneScape, but I've played it more since they re-released the version from 2007. And of course, that game is the most grindy game of all time and often like incredibly boring, but you almost never run out of stuff to do and ways to advance your character and be rewarded for it. So I really want the player to feel like there's a reason to invest in their character development in Dauphin. And I think that's really what's great about a good RPG. You're role playing, you're building your character. And so I keep trying to design these systems for Dauphin in a way that the player can set goals for themselves to develop their character. Because I tend to think that that's one of the most compelling reasons that I keep playing an RPG, is because I know that, like, oh, my next few sessions, I want to hit level 20 in this skill, or I want to be able to fight this boss. So I have to go get like this weapon and level up first before I'm ready to fight this boss. And then just having goals like that for building the player. I think having a line of sight on a strategy like that is important for when you're developing an RPG. Because if you're just going in to create crafting and fishing and all that stuff and none of it connects and there's no reason to level that stuff up, then you're not going to have a compelling game. But again, my big asterisk is that I've never released an RPG, so I might be a little off base here, but that's kind of what's driving my development process.
One thing I'm personally worried about in my project that I'm building, because it's something that I've noticed happening more and more, and this is why it's quite concerning now. And I haven't even added content to my game, like really big content. Is the testability. And who was it? Luis. I think Luis Hernandez asked, hello, I want to know, how do you guys test your game? You test with your friends, or send they build to your dev comrades? I just read it out literally. And this question is something where, for example, for myself, I continuously, every few months, I upload like a dev build on my Discord and let people test. The problem is with this approach that you will not notice when you have regression bugs. Let's say you refactor a system and you accidentally break another system and you don't realize it. And one thing I'm now considering is actually adding unit tests to my game for critical core mechanics that are like fundamental to the game. There's, for example, a project that I really like. It's called GDUnit, which has like a unit test integration in the Godot Engine editor, and you can write unit tests. And I use those already for some other projects. But I'm actually considering doing this for my game as well, and I'm curious what you think, Ben. If you think something like this might be overkill. For example, with unit tests, you can easily go overboard, right, and have so many tests that it's like unmanageable, right?
Right. I have thought about unit testing for Dauphin. It's a really good question. Obviously, for the enterprise, software that I write for my actual job, we often have even unit testing targets where our continuous integration pipeline won't allow us to merge code unless, not only our test pass, but maybe we have 80% unit test coverage or something like that. So it's a incredibly important part of software development. Full transparency, I have no tests, no unit tests of any kind in Dauphin, nor have I really distributed any builds yet. A big part of that is just because I'd really like to wait to distribute a build until I have a vertical slice, so that people kind of know what to test and what is testable, and not something that hasn't been built out yet. You bring up a great question with the regression point. Dauphin's getting to a point where it's probably between 8,000 and 10,000 lines of actual code, and the regressions happen like all the time for me. I'll build something out. Certainly with the upgrade to Godot 4, I broke like everything. But having unit tests for core game functionality does seem wise, especially for, like you said, just some of the most important places in your code. But even as I say that, I wonder, where are the places that are the most important? Because everything's important, right? You can't just have some of the game not working. So I already pulled up GDUnit and put a bookmark on there. I need to check that out. But the other part of this that I can't help but think about is that as a hobbyist, I do all this because it's fun. I write game code because it's fun in my free time. Writing unit tests in my free time is not fun. It would not have a positive impact, I think, on my productivity building Dauphin. So that's another thing to contend with.
Yeah, what I noticed, I had the same thinking, right? I do not have any unit tests in my game, not a single one. But I already had to fix the same bug there's one bug I had to fix 3 times already, over and over.
Yeah.
And it's like a guacamole, you know. And the unit test would have told me during development, like, oh, you are currently breaking something. Who was it? Scaffolds asked, why do you think most game devs are afraid to use automated tests? And Ben, maybe you want to answer it, like, why not? Why not just use unit tests, right? Everywhere in game development.
I wouldn't say I'm afraid of doing it. I just, because I started this out as like a fun side of desk project, unit test was never something that I had in the front of my mind when doing that. You know, I want to, if I have an hour to sit down in the evening to write code, I want to like build the crafting system. I want to work on fishing or, you know, exploration. I don't want to write unit tests. And I realize this is a cop-out answer, but that's my personal experience, just because this is a hobby for me. That's why I haven't done it yet. That's not to say that I won't do it. I think there is a ton of value in there. I wonder if I'm trying to think about some of my major systems and decide if I wrote them in a way that I could actually retrofit unit tests well. Because a lot of times for, again, the software that I write at my job, we adopt architectural patterns that lend themselves better to unit testing. Like for iOS development, we use a lot of model view model, MVVM kind of architectural patterns that are highly testable, because you can unit test your view models, which kind of correspond to ultimately what's reflected on your UI. So I didn't build Dauphin with any kind of testing in mind. So I expect I will run into challenges trying to retrofit meaningful unit tests, but it's not to say it's not worth it. I'll have to take a look.
Yeah, the challenge I found with Godot Engine, at least initially, is that a good unit test is you test the contract, right? You test, for people who don't know what I mean by contract, you have a behavior or a responsibility of some particular component, like a node. Let's say you create a player node, and that player node has a specific responsibility, right? The player should move around and should interact with things. So what you would then test is that you can walk around and interact with things. The problem is, though, that when you access the player class, you have a lot of methods, and then the question is, what exactly do you test in there, right? Which methods do you call? And as some people in the chat call out, right, it's not fun. Like, I want to build another feature. I don't want to sit there an entire day, write unit tests that get green, but I know it works, right? Because I actually clicked the play button, I walked around, and it works. Why would I need to build a test for this to verify that I actually can? And I actually think this is like I call it like a trap when building an RPG, that I notice as soon you add more and more features, that at least for the core blocks, some basic unit tests might be required if you don't want to spend a lot of time fixing over and over the same bugs. Then again, writing a unit test that can reproduce the bug is another challenge. And the good thing, why I call it out GD unit here, it has some features to mock scenes. So it has like a scene runner, and you can, for example, simulate frames. You can simulate user inputs. So it has all these simulation functions to simulate actual user actions. And what it actually does is when you run the unit test, it actually starts up your game and actually performs the things in your game, which is quite neat. Jonas Kinville asked, what about integration tests or end-to-end? Does Godot have anything for that? I think no. There's probably some stuff on GitHub, again, like what we're talking about here right now is all open source and not part of the core Godot engine, but it's basically an extension of Godot, right? People write add-ons, and talking of add-ons, Ben, have you considered writing your own add-on at some point? Is there anything where you're like, man, I would really like this to be an add-on? Why doesn't this exist yet?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think if like any of the systems I've written would be eligible or worth sharing as an add-on. I think nothing comes to mind off the top of my head. I do like the way I've set up my my state management system for the player. It's something I've kind of refactored a few times to the point where it's a very small amount of code as the underlying kind of architecture of the state management, but I found it to be extremely flexible and reliable. And as I'm talking about it, this is actually the state manager is where I should write unit tests if I ever write unit tests for Dauphin. But I don't think that's worth I think it's probably worth a 5-minute, I don't know, Dauphin deep dive tutorial thing and not a plugin. That's a good question though. I wonder if anything else I've written would be a good candidate for a plugin. You've got a couple plugins, right, Miguel? Or at least maybe I'll ask you about I think Behave, right? Is a behavioral tree. This
one here. I got a little mark.
Yeah.
Designed by Nathan Hort, by the way. He did the logo. It was born out of necessity because I needed a good way to model behavior, AI behavior, and it kind of blew up on GitHub unexpectedly. So it's great to see that people like what I've built. And I'm building another add-on that I will reveal in my next devlog. That I think a lot of people who build RPGs will find very useful. I think it's applicable to any RPG out there. So, yeah, little teaser. Enough self advertising here. Talking about Godot 4, how's it going with Godot 4? How are you finding it so far? Because we both recently upgraded our games to it, right? How are you finding it?
Yep. Well, it was certainly a pain to go through the upgrade process, but I am very glad that I did. I think I like it most just because of some of the updates to GDScript. I'm an iOS developer in my day-to-day job, which means I write Swift code. I really like the Swift programming language. It feels very mature. I know some people probably disagree, don't like Swift very much, but I think it's a really nice language to work with. And, when I used to write Swift all day and then come home to write, GDScript 1 or whatever, it was sometimes tough to go back to a language that, calling it immature is not fair, but certainly less mature than something like Swift and not quite as featureful. And the newest iteration of GDScript is obviously still not there, but I love some of the updates that they've made. It really does make writing so much code a little bit nicer and easier to have some of the features that brought in. So I've been thoroughly enjoying it. I'm also just happy to kind of support Godot by going through the effort to bring Dauphin up to Godot 4 and continue to explore those new features, because I do want to give back to the Godot community in some way, since it's such a great piece of software and I've enjoyed using it so much. But yeah, I have thoroughly enjoyed using it. I assume you probably have too with Cave, right?
Yeah, I think my favorite part of about Godot 4 is the new GDScript. I actually think it's my new favorite programming language to build games.
Yeah.
The thing is, I use Java in my main job, and I'm a tech lead. So I use stuff like Spring and Spring Boot, and for people who use Java, they might know this. And it's very boilerplatey, There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of like additional things you need to be aware of, and you need to load into your mental memory all the time when you work with the technology. With GDScript, what I found is that you create a new node, you open it, you have a ready function, you write 2 lines, and immediately something happens. It's like instant with like 3 lines of code. Also, I think the Lambda feature. Well, I was told it's not called Lambda. It's actually it has a different name, but people confuse it with Lambdas. I don't know. Like I got told off once. I should not call it Lambda, but I call it Lambda, so I don't care. I think the Lambdas are my favorite thing, that I can actually just pass in a method, and it makes things so much easier.
I completely agree. Those have been fantastic. I think I've used, I don't think I used these functions much previously, but I guess some of the new functions like filtering on arrays, or like find, where you can pass in a function as an argument. I just love that pattern. It's so easy to use. It makes so much sense conceptually to me. I totally agree. Lambdas are awesome, and this is going to sound like super nitpicky, but I really like the new getter and setter syntax. I'm the type of person who I like to write a getter for something that just wraps a bunch of stuff that doesn't need to be that can be implicit when you want to, I don't know, request something of a node or a class. And I just hated the set get whatever that's in. I had to look it up every time I wanted to use it because I just could not commit the strangeness of it to memory. So having a nice like syntax for a computed variable like that is something I've been enjoying in the new version.
So if you could have one feature in the new GD script version, what kind of feature would you like to have that is currently missing?
So I think one of my favorite things about Swift is protocols, which is kind of like an interface, basically a contract that you would have a class conform to in terms of implementing certain functions or variables. And then you can kind of treat that protocol as a type when you pass objects that conform to that protocol around. So in Swift, we do some kind of like protocol-driven development, as some people call it. I think that's an incredibly helpful feature. And you can kind of achieve the same thing with inheritance, right? I kind of have an organism scene that doesn't have any information about a specific organism, but it knows everything about the sprite, the corruption, the collision, all that stuff. And then I have to kind of right-click on the organism node and say create new child scene every time I create like a new organism. I think a protocol could handle a lot of that stuff. I could have an organism protocol that these things conformed to. It would work in some cases and some not, but that's a feature I really like. Interfaces is something I like in other programming languages. And I do have a nitpicky answer to this as well, and that is named parameters when you're calling a function. Something else that's in Swift. There are regrettably some functions I have in Dauphin that probably take like 6 to 8 parameters, which is not a great practice probably, but that's, sometimes it's unavoidable. And when I call those functions from somewhere else in the code, I have to like go back and look at the function signature because I don't remember what all the parameters are supposed to be. It'd be nice if when you called a function, it kind of would auto-populate with the names of those parameters as it does. Maybe I'm just too spoiled by Swift, or I wouldn't say I'm spoiled by Xcode because I don't like Xcode that much, but I think that could be a helpful feature. But that would, I guess, break like every single function call you had in your game if you ever implemented that. So I don't think that's going to come anytime soon.
The cool thing about Godot Engine is, right, that it's, first of all, it's open source. And you don't need to be even a Godot Engine developer. Like, you don't have to know the engine, and you don't need to know how to add features in order to propose new features, right? So there is this repository on GitHub called Godot-Proposals, and anyone can go there and propose anything, really anything. And it shows there are like thousands of proposals. And there are a few of my favorite proposals. One is a trait system, which is, I think, similar to protocols. You basically can say something is of type, or has this trait. And you can compose multiple traits together. And it's a very vibrant discussion on there. The reason why this stuff doesn't exist yet is, of course, something fundamental like traits. You want to build it right. You don't want to build something that doesn't work and then you can't get rid of it because people start using it, and then you would break the game by removing it. So, and another one I really like, my second favorite proposal, is a pixel perfect camera that someone proposed. Imagine a node that you drop into your scene, and you have pixel perfect like smooth camera movement with scalable UI, but pixel perfect viewport. Which is possible already, but it requires a lot of steps, and there are a couple of tutorials out there to do this in Godot 3. And in Godot 4, I think there are some issues with, I think, physics interpolation to make it properly working. white arc chart, like an interface in Java. Yeah, I think traits are very similar to interfaces. Yes, you can compare to
It's
that.
not. Yeah, I think we're all talking about the same thing. It's like some kind of identifier that means this object has this functionality or has these properties, and we can be sure that that will be the case and rely on that. That's just it's a helpful pattern, I think.
I'm just reading through the questions. Yeah, and with Godot 4, again, like I'm extremely happy that I upgraded. It took me, I think, 4 months total. And in retrospective, I think I should have waited a bit because I upgraded while the engine was still in alpha. Well, I don't regret it, but I learned a lot. But I could have spent that time on other things, right? But I think that knowledge might be useful in the future. I don't know. I like the sound of traits. Composable components. Yes, it's a composition of inheritance pattern.
Yep.
Yeah. I can just recommend it. There are some people. There was someone I was disagreeing with that person on GitHub in the comments. They were saying. I think they said, composition and inheritance solve different problems, and one does not replace the other. And I was kind of disagreeing with that person because in my main job, I do not use inheritance at all. I get by just by using composition. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting discussion.
I think now that I think about it some more, maybe what it is that protocols and Swift, or I think they call them traits in Rust. I think that's what it is in Rust, is traits. Someone said that in the comments. It enforces composition, right? I actually, early on in Dauphin's development, I mentioned I had a base class for organism that I inherited for implementations of organism. I did away with that because I wanted to go with a composition pattern. So instead, when I created a new organism like the sand crab, I had all these little scenes that I would instance as children that it relied on. The problem is there was nothing to enforce that. So I could forget to include something and then it would break at runtime, or something like that. So having a protocol or a trait or whatever would help enforce that, I guess, at compile time and make sure that you composed it correctly. But I totally agree. I've tried to lean into composition over inheritance with Dauphin, and I think it's been like wildly successful. I've been really happy with that.
Could you see yourself contributing to Godot Engine at some point?
Yes, I really want to. It's like somewhere on my bucket list to help with at least to solve an issue or something. The thing is, I don't have a ton of C++ experience. Not that I think I'd have trouble picking up the basics enough to contribute. And in fact, I have, in some cases where I've had like an error message that I didn't understand, I've pulled down the code and like tried to add a print statement or something and compiled my own copy and actually run Dauphin on it to try to help me out. And it has helped me out on a few occasions. So I know I have the tools needed to do it. I just need to make time. I need to make time for it, but I would love to contribute. That would be a great like milestone to give back to the engine a little bit in that way.
Yeah, I tried I think I created a YouTube short once to motivate people to contribute to the engine. But I agree. I think one challenge also is the initial onboarding, right? Imagine there was a Udemy course that you could watch, and afterwards you know exactly how the Godot engine works internally and how to contribute. There is actually a YouTube video by Juan, the one of the co-creators of Godot Engine, where he actually starts digging into the core components of Godot Engine, explains the folder structure. Unfortunately, there's only one part of it. It actually says part 1. There's no part 2. So I think this is definitely something that would potentially help a lot more people contribute to the engine. Talking of time, we are almost out of time because we are already live for over an hour. Is there anything you want to add, Ben, on Dauphin or Godot 4?
I'm just incredibly grateful for everyone's interest in Dauphin and in the channel and everything. I certainly, like I said, I launched the channel 4 years ago or whatever with the idea of at least having 10 to 15 people who were interested in the game to keep me accountable for working on what I was working on, and it's become much bigger than that. And I'm grateful for the chance to motivate other folks to do what I've done and make time for something like game development if you're really passionate about it. So I guess just thanks. And thank you, Miguel, for hosting me today. This was a lot of fun, and I think we should do it again sometime.
Yes, definitely. Quick question. I don't remember it correctly, maybe. Were you the one who said that you play Rocket League?
I do play Rocket League. I probably have like 700 or 800 hours in Rocket League.
What's your rank?
It's been a while since I've played. I think the best I got was I was able to like spend a whole season in the lower ranks of champion. For like that was my prime, like champion, whatever the lowest one is. I just got up there and I was able to like stay the rest of that season playing ranked at low champion. So it's my claim to fame. I still can't do my buddies that I play with, we always joke about these guys who fly through the air and do the spins as they're in the air. I suppose it's because they've mapped the rotation to the bumper buttons or something. I still can't do any of that.
The spider crawl, on the controller.
Yeah.
I've
given up on that, so I think I've topped out, but I still love to play it. It's so fun.
Because I'm also champ 1, so if you want, we can play at some point together. That would be fun, I guess.
Duo live stream, talk about game development while getting smashed in Rocket League. That'd be great.
Yes. Game dev and fail is the title.
There we go. That'll be fun.
I would say I have a couple of questions on some other topic, and then we do chat, a couple of chat Q&A, and then we wrap up, I would say. A small thing I wanted to chat about with you, and this is something you, I think, put a lot of emphasis on, and which is like a key thing of your devlogs as well, is a healthy work-life balance. I think this is something you continuously draw attention to, and the first question I have, and this is, I think, a lot of people will have this question, is how to get motivated to go to the gym or do workouts. How can you get motivated to do workout?
That is a great question. If I knew the answer to that, we'd all be in great shape, right? That wouldn't be a problem. I think, it's people ask me about motivation all the time, whether it's motivation to work on Dauphin in my free time, motivation to, I guess, do some of the lifting that I do. I think, and I've heard other people talk about this as well, I think what it comes down to is not motivation, but drive, which is a different concept than motivation. You have to be driven to do some of these things, even when you don't have motivation to do it. There are, without a doubt, times, probably weekly, where I sit down to work on Dauphin, or I drudge out to the garage at like 6 o'clock in the morning to do a workout, and I don't want to do it. But I'm still driven to do it because I have goals that I want to reach. And so I think the answer is to try to set goals, even if they're super small and incremental. Like if I sat down to start working on Dauphin and my goal was to release Dauphin, that's not going to be a goal that drives me to work through a lack of motivation if I'm currently not motivated, right? You have to be smart about how you do that. But I think the answer is to develop drive. Along with that, I think the value of developing a habit around some of these things is really understated. And I think I've got the book somewhere, but Atomic Habits by James Clear is a fantastic read if you're interested in. Oh, there you go. Miguel's already got it. He's familiar.
Great book.
Being able to do something like sit down and work on your project or go work out without having to think about it. Is a huge benefit, right? It's just part of your routine. I wake up in the morning and I go down to the garage and I work out. It doesn't feel like I'm straining to do it because it's something I do every day. And I actually started working out when I met my now wife. I was not in poor shape, but I was just a
Hmm.
a tall, skinny guy, which I guess I still am, really. But I started working out just to, I don't know, get in better shape once we met and everything. And then I've now gotten to the point where I really feel like I physically feel not as great if I have skipped like more than a couple workouts. Like I feel like I'm falling off the wagon. I think it probably has like a negative effect on my like headspace if I haven't exercised. So at this point, I'm kind of like locked in.
Hmm.
I have to keep doing that to kind of, I don't know, keep myself happy, which is obviously a great place to be, right? Because that enough can kind of drive me to work out. It's like, all right, I want to be on top of things today, so I want to work out. But I think developing the drive is more important than trying to think about the motivation, because you will not always be motivated. That's just a fact of life for anything you want to do. You're not always going to have the motivation to do it. That was a long-winded answer, but I hope that kind of
Yeah,
that kind of
totally.
hits it a little bit.
Um, yeah, in your 5 a.m. video, by the way, it's not called like that, but I refer to it as the 5 a.m. video.
Yeah, that's all
uh,
good.
you give this very good pro tip of like how to become a morning person. It's basically, go to bed early, right? No problem. The challenge is, and this is something I personally struggle with, is let's say you have a very stressful day at work. It's 6:30 p.m. You didn't even eat yet. You cook dinner, you chill a bit, and it's like 7:30 p.m. or 8 p.m. Like, I don't want to go to bed, you know. I want to like start having, you know, personal life, you know. How
Yep.
how can you convince your brain to think about the reward that comes tomorrow morning rather than I want the reward of relaxing now?
So that's a great question. Resolving the issue of like when I get my me time during the day is all, it's a challenge every day, 'cause especially
Hmm.
since we got this puppy. So much free time is now devoted to him. Like half of my mornings now, instead of being at my desk, are now walking him and trying to keep him from destroying our living room. Um, I think I've lost my train of thought here. What was your question? It'll remind me.
Yes.
Sorry.
How to go to bed early, basically.
Yeah, so I my schedule, I go to bed on a good day around 10 o'clock, so not that early, and I wake up at 5 or 5:30. So I actually have found that for my physiology, 7 hours of sleep is ideal because I'm not dragging through the day. That's what my body seems to need, which is not too far
Hmm.
off. The doctor recommended 8 or whatever. I
Yeah.
certainly can't do much less than 7 for too many days in a row.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I would say that in the evenings, oftentimes I still do have time between 8 and 10 or 9 and 10, depending on when the dog kind of settles down, or if I'm watching a movie or hanging out with my wife or something, which is not a ton of time. But I do find that around that 9 or 10 o'clock time, because I woke up at like 5:30 that morning and lifted, I am exhausted, so I have no
Hmm.
trouble getting to bed. I think it's just a matter of powering through to kind of set that schedule for yourself. I fall asleep within seconds of hitting the pillow, and my wife tells me this because I'll start snoring like seconds after my head hits the pillow. Um, but I really think it's because I have developed the habit of waking up early and doing that daily exercise. So it's a combination of multiple things, I think.
Hmm.
But it is tough to, if the nighttime is a time when you usually had your free time, like if you're a night owl, it could be tough to change that. And I would even say that you shouldn't force yourself to become a morning person. I think everyone has a circadian rhythm, and I think this is supported by multiple studies as well. Some people really are night owls. It's not as good for their physiology to try to wake up early and go to bed early. So for me, it did work out. I think I was probably meant to be a morning person all along, because
Hmm.
now I can wake up at 5:30 without an alarm. Um, but
Oh
yeah, for
wow.
the longest time, I was staying up super late, and I mean, in college I probably stayed up till like 1 or 2 in the morning every night, which is not a productive thing. But it's just finding out what's right for your body, and setting the habit and powering through whatever they say, like 21 days to try to form the habit.
I think people can relate to that, right? When you play a game and you start hearing the birds outside,
Yeah.
you know, it's probably time to wrap things up, you know.
Probably time to wrap things up. Yep.
Yeah. Last question, and this is more of a personal thing that I was struggling with, especially in the early days of YouTube, is how to not feel guilty that you don't upload every week a new video. Like, how can you, like, maybe to new people out there who want to get started with YouTube and they feel like, oh, I need to create a new video all the time because otherwise people will unsubscribe and will forget me, you know. How do you cope with that anxiety?
That's another really good question. So I think when I started to get to the point where I had like even hundreds or a couple thousand subscribers, which again at the time was more than I ever thought I would get, I started to get into a place where I would call it an unhealthy mindset, where I was checking YouTube Studio like every morning when I woke up to see if I had new comments or new subscribers. If I got a comment that was like particularly nasty or something, they were living in my head, right, for a while after I read that comment, which is just, it's not productive. Nothing came from that. There's just not a healthy mindset. I can't really say how I got out of that apart from just resolving that it needed to happen. So I kind of came to terms with the fact that the people who subscribe to me and support my work, they, for the most part, they really support me and what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is develop my games while maintaining a healthy lifestyle. And sometimes that means not uploading as much as I'd like to, which has certainly been the case for the past few months, as I've only uploaded like once per month, which is, about half as much as I'd like to be uploading. But once I kind of came to terms with the fact that, like, listen, I think the folks who really support me and my channel are supporting the way I'm doing things, and the fact that I try to make this time for myself and try to be healthy about it. Once I came to terms with that, I just stopped worrying about it. I don't really check YouTube Studio hardly at all, except for the first couple days after I post a video, so that I can respond to comments and interact with folks. I certainly don't like check my view numbers or subscriber numbers. I don't obsess over that anymore. I'm just there to try to create good content and post it for people to enjoy. Very little, I would say 0% of what I do is trying to increase my social media footprint. I'm not trying to clickbait stuff. I'm not trying to like nail the algorithm. Certainly trying to create good titles and thumbnails, as everyone is, but I'm just trying to do my thing, and that's how I've come to peace with it.
Yeah, that's very good advice. And a lot of the stuff you said actually resonates with me. I would say in the first 6 months of my YouTube career was the same. I was actually checking YouTube Studio every day. And especially in the early days, when you get a lot of new subscribers, it's kind of like addictive, because you're like, oh, I got so many subs. And then you're like, oh, why don't I get more subs now? What am I doing wrong? You know, and you start worrying about things that do not matter. And I think since early 2021, I would say, or like summer 2021, I actually stopped caring about, well, not stop caring about my YouTube channel, but stop caring about the meaning of numbers. Even, and this is something I'm still sometimes struggling with, is I think that my last devlog is like 4 or 5 months ago, and the one before was again like a year ago. So there is like a huge month gap. And I was quite anxious about it at first, but as you rightfully said, right, focusing on the journey and keep going. If you never stop creating, it actually does not matter if you upload every day or every month or every year, as long as you do not stop, you know. And I think that's the key message here.
Yeah, and I think it's the whole mindset of, if you were to post and someone were to comment like why aren't you posting more often? Like I want you to post every 2 weeks or something. This is going to sound harsh, and I don't mean it to sound harsh, but I'm not the right creator for that person. They should go find someone to follow who posts the content that they like at the cadence that they want. I'm just doing my thing, and the people who are still here watching appreciate that. So that's
Oh,
once I
yes.
came to terms with that, that's it. Yeah.
Talking about it, like we are almost 1.5 hours in and still a couple of viewers here. So thank you so much for sticking by. And I'm just looking through the chat if there's any question from the community. I think I saw a question further up about where is it, about game design. Yes. So Vishal Memi asked, "Hey DevDuck, love your vlogs. I like the programming software part of it, but have trouble with game design. Did you always have the game design intuition or something you had to develop?" It's a good question.
It's a kindly worded question because I think it probably gives me more credit for game design chops than I actually have. All of the game design decisions I've made for Dauphin have been almost purely informed by things that I like about games that I have played. I've played so many games for so long over my lifetime since I got my Nintendo 64 one Christmas morning when I was just a little kid. I've been playing like Ocarina of Time for the first time. So really, and I think this is clear in my devlogs too, I'll always reference other games, even as I have in today's live stream with a lot of the systems I'm building. So that's the experience I'm drawing on to build what I've done for Dauphin. I wouldn't necessarily call it intuition. It's me really thinking hard about and trying to condense some of my favorite things about my favorite games and extract what it is that I felt was compelling about it and try to put my own spin on that for Dauphin, or at least implement it in a way that makes sense for Dauphin's world. I will say that I'm also reading, I have it over here somewhere, Designing Games by Tynan Sylvester. I think he created it's the Dwarf Fortress not remake but inspired game. Shoot, I wish I could remember what it's called. It's on Steam. It's really popular. Do you know what I'm talking about, Miguel?
RimWorld?
RimWorld, yeah, that's it.
Yes, I love that game.
So,
I didn't know that guy has a book.
Yeah, it's called Designing Games, and it's I'm not that far into it, but it's really interesting, and it is filling in a lot of gaps, and kind of filling in gaps, but also explaining to me why I found some of these things in past games that I've played compelling. It kind of goes into a lot of the emotional reasons why people find game systems and mechanics captivating. So yeah,
wow.
I totally recommend it. I'm only not that far into it, but I recommend it so far for sure.
Yeah, feel free to drop me a link afterwards. By the way, some of the stuff we mentioned in this live stream, I will also put the links in the description. Last question. So I'm gonna pick one last question from the chat, and then we are wrapping up. Skeffels asks, what is a feature you want for Dauphin, but now is completely out of scope?
I think you kind of asked me that before.
Oh yeah, I think it's similar to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, my answer before was that I have let Dauphin's scope creep completely out of control because I just enjoy challenging. I enjoy the challenge of building large systems, which is not an answer to the question, but I think multiplayer is something that I've thought about before. I think local multiplayer is something that would be a lot of fun with the way I'm designing Dauphin around exploration and trying to, save large areas from corruption. It's something that feels like it could be very cooperative. Of course, Miguel has told me that it's just as simple as dropping a few nodes into your scene, so maybe I'll have to give that a try someday. But that's something that comes to mind when I hear that question.
Yeah. Alrighty. I think that's all for today. If it was up to me, I would just keep going, but I think Ben and I, we are tired already and we have things to do. So thank you so much everyone for watching, and anyone who is watching this on the video on demand later. Like and subscribe. Very important. Check out Ben's channel. It would surprise me if you don't know his channel yet, but yeah, if you don't know him, check him out. Great devlogger. Actually, a little bit of a fan mode activated now. Ben's devlogs were actually the reason why I considered doing YouTube myself. So yeah, you literally inspired me to get started with YouTube myself. Amongst other people, Heartbeast as well. He also inspired me a lot. Yeah, and,
that's awesome to hear. I mean, I do have people tell me that from time to time. That's a big part of the motivation and the drive to keep doing it. So that's awesome to hear. I love how we could kind of like pass that along. You know, as one channel grows, it inspires another, right? So we kind of bloom out into this community. I love that.
Yes, I love it. And also Godot, I love Godot. And if you don't use Godot yet, or you never really looked into it, feel free to check it out. It's free and open source. And also, yeah, this is a GoGodotJam event, so feel free to check out GoGodotJam. You can still join. There's still time. So join, build games, and there are some other interesting events happening during GoGodotJam. Yeah, I would say let's wrap things up. I think I'm going to stay with Ben a bit in Discord to chat a bit further. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching. And
before you turn off, I just want to say thank you, Miguel, for hosting. Miguel did all the hard work setting all this up. There was no skin off my back to join.
Oh,
he did all the setup, so I'm grateful. So thank you for making this happen, Miguel.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye bye.